And recently we reconnected because of a LinkedIn post.
Yeah.
And the post was about, well, it inspired today's topic. But before we get into it, I want to let my guest introduce herself today.
Sure. Thanks, Mana. Yes. Hi, everyone. Tanya Stanfield here. I am the founder and CEO of True Believer Brands. We help purpose-driven brands find their voice, find the right marketing strategy, and then we help them implement that strategy together with their teams. So really excited for this conversation today. And yeah, just ready to get into it.
Yeah, you've done actually a lot of work helping companies with their sales structures, sales strategies, as well as marketing. My experience is mostly marketing. So I'm very excited to bring your point of view to this conversation. So let's dive in. So
Yeah.
the article that triggered this conversation, and like the kids do on TikTok, or they do, or on YouTube, they do response videos. That's what we're going to do today. So I want you to tell me, as we go through this, if you agree or disagree with some of these statements. But the article is by Bret Adams. It appeared in the Harvard Business Review, and it's titled "Traditional B2B Sales and Marketing Are Becoming Obsolete." And that's we sort of stole that obsolete word for today's topic. So fundamentally, the whole idea behind the article is that most B2B sales and marketing teams typically function in a serial or linear manner, and that model has become obsolete. Would you agree, disagree?
Yeah, definitely agree. I mean, like you said, Mana, I've been in this industry for about 20 years and I've sort of straddled between the marketing and sales side throughout my career. So, I think when you posted this data the first time on LinkedIn, I was like, finally, there's data to back up, what I've experienced either working in-house or with clients when it comes to this linear thinking of the sales process that doesn't really fit reality. Just due to the experience that we have over and over again working with customers and trying to push them through this funnel that doesn't really work, right? So agree 100%.
Yeah, I one of the things I've experienced is that from a marketing perspective, the handoff from marketing to sales is usually clunky or doesn't exist at all. But I'm not a salesperson, right? So I had to kind of become a student of it to understand what's happening. But I do have a very good sense of what customers want, and a big part of this article talks about that sales process and what people are looking for. But let's start with some statistics. All right, so from a Gartner survey of over 750 customers, B2B stakeholders, we learned that only 17% of their buying time is spent interacting directly with supplier sales teams. Most of the time, if you look at it, 27 and 18% is spent independent learning, and 22% is spent on building consensus internally, 11% building consensus with partners and stakeholders. What I'm seeing here is a lot of time spent on independent learning and a lot of time spent building consensus. And then very little time spent on the actual interaction with the sales reps. So have you seen this? Agree, disagree?
That that part about building consensus and what a complex process that is. And I can share an example of I used to work for a consulting firm that did consulting and philanthropy, and I can't tell you how many times the salesperson would be talking to one person at the organization. It might be the director of development or the president of the organization, and they're selling to that person. Then when it comes to give a presentation, all of a sudden they're giving a presentation to a room of like 5 or 6 more people, people on the board, people who are colleagues. And all of a sudden you have all of these other stakeholders in the room who are almost starting fresh. They haven't been with you throughout the beginning of the sales process. So it's almost like starting over again and, reselling. And that can be really hard, especially if those new people in the room have already formed an opinion about you. Maybe it's based on, they talked to other people in their circle and said, hey, have you heard of this organization? What do you know about them? Or maybe it's just research they've done online. They've already formed this opinion, and the salesperson hasn't had any interaction with them or played any role in helping them form that opinion. So I see that happen a lot.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I've experienced it myself, and I see a lot this effect where we change our minds, and we're going to talk a little bit more about it. We start with thinking that we need X, Y, and Z. We may talk to a salesperson, or we may talk to a company, and then something happens from there to the end of the sales process, from when we pull the trigger. And oftentimes what I've seen this with leads of ours, or even with my own decision-making process, I may end up with a completely different solution or idea than I started with. And we'll talk about that a little bit, because that's actually one of the points of this article as well. And because, we're talking about the stakeholder process, and all of the non-sales time that we spend, one of the studies has shown that helping today's B2B buyers, this is a quote from the article, isn't a sales challenge nearly as much as it's an information challenge. Agree, disagree?
Absolutely agree. And I think, something I've been saying for a long time, Anna, is that for some reason, when we get into B2B sales, we have this idea that it is so different from B2C. And the only big differences between B2C and B2B is that when you're selling B2B, you're selling probably more complex solutions into very complex environments and organizations, hence, trying to get all the stakeholder engagement and consensus. However, the research that we do as customers in a B2C sense, I mean, think about the last time you made a big purchase. I'm thinking back to the last time I was looking for a mattress. I spent very little time talking to salespeople at mattress stores. I did most of my research online, going through reviews, going to individual websites, and talking to people who are in my sphere of influence. I spent very little time actually talking to a salesperson at the store. And I think that is par for the course. Well, the same goes for B2B. When you're looking at a solution, like you mentioned earlier, you might be talking to a salesperson, but you're still sort of formulating in your mind, the pros and cons and finding the right fit for you. And you want to take in all the information that you can. So I agree 100% that, a lot of that time is being spent online. A lot of that time is being spent in other channels, because in B2B, it's so critical to make the right choice. I mean, think about it. If you're working in a big organization and the decision falls on you to make that choice, you want to make sure you're making the right choice. Like, this isn't about buying like the wrong mattress. It's about buying the wrong solution that's not fit for your organization. And the impacts of that can be really massive. So of course they're going online. Of course they're combing reviews or combing your content to make sure that you are the right fit or that you can create the right product or solution for them.
Yeah, I totally agree. And my cat agrees. She's over here making noises, if you can hear her. As a marketer, one of the things I want to get across to clients and people advise, is that you cannot have too much information out there. The problem is about information. Buyers spend most of their time in information seeking mode, and not just information as in, is this company the right company for me? But also, what solution do I really need? Am I really understanding my problem at its core appropriately to actually make the right decision? What do my stakeholders need, right? When we looked at the data, people spend a lot of time building consensus. So what information do I need to build consensus? It's a very long, this period has become so much longer. Just, you give me the example of a B2C situation. You know how long it takes people to buy something? They research it everywhere. As you can imagine, for B2B, that process is even longer and even more complicated, because there's so many people involved in that decision. There's so many things to look at. the price tag is much higher, right? The consequences of failing at this are much higher. The stakes are much higher, right? So it's not realistic to expect that people will make a decision just by having a few conversations with the sales representative. Only what the data is telling us, what, that only 17% of their time is spent doing that. The rest of it is information gathering and translating that information into arguments to buy the stakeholders' approvals, right? So your website matters so much. Again, the data in this study shows that people spend just as much time on the website as they spend talking to sales reps. So you have all the information that you need on your website for people to make their decisions. As Your role as a salesperson shouldn't be just to pitch to them or talk to them at the beginning and at the end of the sales process. Are you continuously engaged with them during the process to feed them information, to take the pulse and say, hey, what did you find out? What's your research showing? Am I giving you what you need? What's my role in this conversation? Asking more questions and taking the pulse to find out what other information they need. For those of you who are joining us, this part of conversation focuses on this idea that today's B2B buyers, for them, it's not a sales challenge, it's an information challenge. Content marketing. We've been talking about content marketing for ages, yet so many B2B companies are not doing it right. Do you have any examples in your experience of the content side of how content can help buyers make this decision, and how marketing and sales can work together to provide that content? Because the content doesn't necessarily just have to come from the website or from a blog, right?
Yeah, well, I think most importantly, the best content marketing that I see is marketing that is created in partnership with your sales leaders or your sales partners. We might talk about this further on in the live stream, but there still exists this silo between marketing and sales. There still exists this mentality in a lot of B2B organizations that marketing is sort of like the sidekick of sales. I think the article used that exact terminology. And it needs to be working together, because your sales team, at the end of the day, I don't think salespeople are going to go away or they're going to be obsolete. I do think that they're going to be responsible for not just maintaining that human relationship, that human side of it, but they're sort of the eyes and ears when they are listening to potential customers. So the information that they're gathering through that process is really critical for marketers to understand, okay, what are the questions that customers are asking? What are they really getting hung up on? And how can we create information to meet them where they're at? So I think the best, the companies that are doing it right are the companies where the marketing and the sales teams are working together to create the content that really meets the customer needs, instead of marketing sort of in this corner trying to figure out what can we do next to engage the customer, and sales sort of keeping that relationship close to the vest. I think the best way to really accomplish this goal, and you need to follow your customers through that journey, and both sides have that unique perspective to really get that job done.
Yeah, and it's also on us marketers to ask those questions of the sales teams. And another thing that I always ask is, have you talked to your customers recently? So the question I ask is, of the sales teams, have you talked to the customers that you just acquired recently, to really understand what was their experience of the sales process? What could you do differently? What could you have done better? Also, what information did they need in their process that you may not have had visibility into? And then come back to the marketing team and say, oh, here's some of the information that they were looking for and that they found useful that maybe we didn't have or that we could develop. And then the marketing team can help with developing those materials.
Yeah,
And as
100%.
and as we're talking about that, we're now starting to talk about structure and infrastructure. How
Mhm.
do the teams work together, and are marketing and sales teams the only ones that need to be involved, right? We talked about about this strong preference for to be without sales rep interaction. They would prefer 43% of people surveyed said they would prefer a rep-free buying experience. 29% baby boomers, 54% millennials. So if they prefer a sales-free rep experience, what exactly does that mean? I mean, do we really don't want salespeople to be involved at all? From an infrastructure perspective, what do we need here? What are your thoughts?
I think this is one of those things where it really depends upon the industry and what you're actually selling. Not every B2B service is something that you can just purchase with the click of a button. I do, like I said earlier, I do think that we still are going to need salespeople to build those relationships. I wonder sometimes if that data comes from, the fact that every single one of us has had an unpleasant experience with a sales rep, and it gives the rest of the sales reps out there who, I've never worked with a sales rep that hasn't been marvelous, but it gives them a bad name when you have people who are, sneaking into your LinkedIn DMs, sending you, constant emails. I think there exists this really negative connotation about salespeople, which makes people very relieved when they don't have to deal with that process. If they can just click a button or send an email and get what they need. But I think with these really complex solutions, the more complex they are, I just don't think that's possible. Even when we're looking at, SaaS or anything like that, typically when they're going to be building a really big product for an enterprise client, you still need to talk to someone on the sales side. You still need to interact with a human being. So those are my thoughts on it. But I'd be really interested to hear your thoughts as well.
Yeah, agree. I mean, I don't think that the sales role is going to become obsolete. And so the title of this and the title of our article is a little bit tricky. I think that ultimately the conclusion the article comes to, and that I agree with, is that the process, the systems we've built are becoming obsolete. And the role of the salesperson is being redefined. We do need salespeople, and we need them to be part of that information gathering expectation that the data is showing us. And this has been an adage. I don't know how you say that in English. This has been a saying in the marketing and sales space forever that people don't buy from brands; they buy from people they trust
Mhm.
and respect and love. Right. And that's always been key to the sales role. And so ultimately it's not about sales roles going away, it's about how can you be that person they trust and love, and trust in this case based on what the data tells them, but what the people are telling us. Trust also requires information, and as you said, following them at the stages that they are in their decision making process and giving them the information that they need, not the information that we think they need to choose us. Oftentimes, I will give information that will help them choose somebody else because we're not the right fit, or maybe it'll be better for them financially to work with a freelancer and not with us.
Right.
Um, I want to help them in that decision making process to to help them with their exact needs, not what I think the needs are or what I need necessarily. Although we always want to close the deals, right? We always want those sales.
Yeah, yeah. That's a really important distinction, I think, about the evolving role of the sales leader or the sales rep, is that if you are going to win in this economy, it's not about winning over the customer, it's about serving the customer. And, I do the same, Anna. There are some, potential clients who come to us and it's not the right fit. They're looking for something completely different. And I would much rather help them find that person or that vendor than have this hardcore focus on like forcing them to fit a solution that I think is best. And I think that's why this whole funnel mentality just hasn't worked, because it's almost like we are forcing the customer through a process. We're only giving them information as we deem that they need it, and that's just not working anymore, and it hasn't worked for a long time.
Which leads us to another point of this article, and that we've been hinting at this concept of the unified commercial engine. So the first statement here is that serial commercial engine is hopelessly out of date. So we've already talked about that. There is no single handoff from digital to in person. And then this concept that customers may seek sales input early in the deal to explore solutions, but return to digital to build requirements. Let's talk about that really quickly. So they first talk to a salesperson, and then they say, "I'll get back to you." And then they do what? They go online or they start talking to their friends. So when if I'm the salesperson, they first talk to me, and I think they know what they would need, and that I'm the only one in this process. But that's not exactly how people make their decisions in this day and age, right? They talk to me and then they go do what?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny talking about this because as someone who's been on sales teams, I think we create these stories in our head about what is going on with the customer, after we talk to them, after we send a proposal. We create all sorts of stories like, oh, they just got busy, or, oh, they're just sitting on it. Like, what are they doing? Why are they taking so long? Where this data shows that they're doing a lot of work. So, yeah, I think, it's really important to recognize that your customer is doing all sorts of things behind the scenes, and having this unified sales or this unified commercial engine. I read that story and I was really fascinated by it because I think it breaks down those silos that we're so used to, and it shows, as we should have expected, or we should have been assuming all along, that closing a sale is a team sport. And I know some people might not want to hear that. And, we still have these structures that exist where a big part of a salesperson's salary comes from commission. So, it's important for them to take the credit, because it's their life, it's their livelihood. But something has to change here, because it needs to be a team effort. Your salespeople are not going to be meeting those quotas or meeting as many as they could be if we don't start seeing this as a unified commercial engine. I think that's the term that was used.
Yep. Yeah, it is. And I raised my hands when you said that, because one of my concerns is that one of the reasons why the marketing and sales functions are not aligning oftentimes also comes from the fact that structurally we've built these linear engines where also the closing a deal brings about commission, right? And in a lot of the structures that companies are using today, they're still commission based. So if marketing helps close that sale, that deal, who gets the commission? Nobody wants I wouldn't want if I was commission, my compensation was commission based or heavily commission based. I wouldn't want that to be taken away from me or even put in question. Mm-hmm. Right. So again, we're coming back to this redefinition of the sales engine. How should it be structured and how should it work? And the article gives one big solution to all of this. And it's a quote from Jenna Bichuk, the former head of sales at Smart Technologies. And she says, rebuild it from the ground up. Rebuild it from the ground up. So for those of you just joining, the topic we're talking about right now is how this linear marketing solution, marketing and sales solution engine is becoming obsolete, and that the solution to that is to rebuild the whole structure from the ground up. And what would that look like? So now we get to dream. The article presents a case study from Smart Technologies, Smart Solutions, Smart Technologies, of how they completely re-engineered their sales marketing and sales engine, and they did it from ground up. So now it's time for us to dream a little bit. And what will this look like? First, do you agree, disagree that we need to rebuild it from ground up?
Yeah, I think this depends. I definitely agree that we need to rethink our structures on how this all works together. And a lot of companies might avoid doing that because it will upset the order of things. But if we're data driven business leaders and we're looking at this data, that's collected by a very prominent company, Gartner. They're like the queens and kings of data for marketing and sales. I think it's something that we really need to consider. What that looks like, I haven't actually really given it a lot of thought. Like I said, I read this case study in the Harvard Business Review with a lot of interest. I love how the head of marketing and the head of sales came together for the solution. And this solution was driven by the pandemic, I believe. They saw change coming. They saw that they were going to have some struggles ahead. So they decided, okay, it's time to drop the silos and really rethink how this is going to work, because people really needed information during the pandemic. That's what they were really looking for. So now the head of sales, she calls herself former head of sales. The marketer calls himself the former head of marketing. And they've also involved people outside of sales and marketing. I think you asked the question before, who else needs to be involved? Whoever is customer facing definitely needs to be involved. So whether that's your customer success team, or if you're in consulting, it's your client services team, your consultants, they definitely need to be involved in that. But, I think if we're going to talk about restructuring, the marketing and sales functions and unifying them, all voices need to be at the table. And we need to start thinking more in terms of what do our customers need, instead of what we need. I mean, we have needs to do our jobs and to serve those customers well, but at the end of the day, it's all about the customer. It's not about hanging on to these old paradigms, or these old ways of thinking that don't serve the customer. I mean, if we have a customer saying that almost 50% don't want to deal with a salesperson, that's not good, but I think we can change that.
Yeah, and my reaction to this concept of reengineering. So we're talking about the solution to rebuild it from the ground up. My reaction to this is that it's only possible for large companies who are willing to spend a lot of time and effort onto this. So, real talk, your small B2B company, one, they may not have a very sophisticated marketing and sales engine to start with because there's only a few people. To talk about big restructures or reengineering may not apply to them at the same time. It may be a lot easier for them to do it, right? Because it's a small team. In the case of smart technologies, we're talking about hundreds of people who were restructured. And by restructure, we're not meaning laid off. Because a lot of times people think they were given, like you said, new titles. The entire framework of how the organization structure has changed. I've, for a very long time, been one to want to see marketing, sales, customer service, and public relations merge under one umbrella, one leadership, one team where they function together toward the same goal. But for many organizations, that takes a lot of effort. That takes a lot of time. And there's this fear that a lot of that effort and time is going to take away from the results that you're pushing for. So, do I agree with this? In an ideal world, yes, I would like to see this engine rebuilt, but it's going to take a lot of work, which tells me you need to start now. You need to start this change now, because smart companies, and I'm not just talking about this company that's called Smart, smart companies have recognized this for a long time, that the system is broken. And us in marketing, we see that all the time because we may generate soft leads that never go anywhere. Our communication is broken. We see the disconnect. And we cannot fix that without strong leadership that will say, all right, we gotta reorganize, and y'all need to talk to each other a little bit more. Smart technologies, from the case studies, they part of their changes was they established an internal team specifically deployed to help support each one of the 5 common buying jobs. So they identified five common buying jobs: learn, buy, order, install, adopt, support. And then established internal teams to support each other, reassigning nearly every member of legacy marketing, sales, service, and success staff as a result of that. 250 team members received new job designations as part of the process. They also created 3 centers of excellence where they consolidated otherwise duplicative efforts across traditional functional boundaries: one for data and analytics, one for customer insights and positioning, one for creative and digital experience. A lot of you who are going to watch this just gave you a headache. One, because you may not even have some of those functions on your teams, like a data analytics function, right? Or a positioning function. We usually outsource that to branding partners. And 2, because it is a big endeavor. But they sat down and did it. Any thoughts from you on this one?
Yeah, I think it just, looking at this company, yes, they're bigger. They have all these roles that already existed that most, small or even mid-sized B2B companies can only dream of, can only imagine. But this all comes back to something that I've been saying for years, is that we need to stop thinking about marketing is sitting over here, sales is sitting over here, client service is sitting over here, all of these silos. Your entire organization needs to have a marketing and sales mindset. And for the people who are afraid of sales or don't think of themselves as marketers, that might make them hesitate a little bit. They might protest a little bit, but it's so important. And I think that is the only way you can even start to reimagine some of these teams or some of these structures. If everyone understands, it is my role might be in engineering, but my role is also to help sales and marketing to have that mindset. I read a story, I think it's in a Daniel Pink book. It's called To Sell is Human, where he shares this story about a company that had engineers who were also trained in sales. So they were also taking sales calls or helping on sales calls, and how much of an impact that had on their growth. That's just an example of how you can start to migrate your mindset and your thinking for your entire organization, to understand that this is not a serial organization. This is an organization where it's all hands on deck, and we're all responsible for, the optics of our company and the profitability of our company and the sales.
Yeah. From the case study, again, we're learning that their goal was to recognize their limitation and better align their commercial functions. However much they need to dismantle their structure to enable people to service their customers through whichever channel at whatever time on whatever job. So fundamentally, in this case study, what we're learning is that they restructured everything to actually be very customer centric, recognizing that this linear sales model does not align with how customers think, how they gather their information, and they're reengineering it to match this convoluted, long process. And then everybody on the team, to your point, everybody on the team becomes part of this new engine to be able to serve the customers wherever they are, whenever they need it. Whether that's when they they talk to some frontline workers, like the engineers, let's say, whether they talk to customer service, whether they talk to a salesperson. Everybody's one. Everybody should be aware of the customer needs and be able to service them wherever they are. Again, it's a big task for a lot of companies, because now we're talking also about employee engagement. We got to make sure that our employees are happy. Otherwise, they're not going to be very good representatives of our brand. Um, but clearly, there are companies who are doing it and who have tremendous success. And for those of you who don't believe us, they present the data too. And the data says that in 18 months, the lead volume was up by 50%, lead acceptance has increased by 35%, and most dramatically, year over year growth stands at an incredible 48%, all during a global pandemic. Right? Those are significant numbers. Now, based on how you read the article, in here it says in 18 months, their lead volume is up to 50%. I'm not reading that as in like I'm reading it as in like that's when this system kicked in. I doubt that in 18 months they were able to re-engineer everything and get these results. What was your
Mm.
reaction when you read that?
I didn't really think about that time wise, but I think that these things do take time. I would be very surprised if they were able to get it up and running and get those results, all in 18 months. I'm thinking there had to be some lead up time to that, setting up the system, then executing it, testing it, and then getting those results. But as I'm thinking more and more about how can other companies, do this if they aren't as big, if they don't have all of these people or this big engine that they can sort of deploy. I think, a good first step is to start having conversations within your organization between marketing and sales and other stakeholders in the company, whether it's your client services, customer service, about this concept. When you say, the time to start is now, I think now it's time to have this conversation as a leader with your organization and say, hey, this is the reality. What can we do to make sure that we are in lockstep together and we drop this mindset that marketing's over here and they're delivering the leads, okay, now they're done, now sales is over here and it's their job to close, and now it's customer service. Start having those conversations and get creative and start reimagining. There's an entrepreneur I call who likes to play stupid idea time. Play stupid idea time with this concept. You have to start somewhere, and eventually you'll come up with an idea that's going to work for you. It might not be exactly what Smart Technologies did, but start having that conversation right now, because this isn't going to change. It's only going to become, I think that time with the salesperson is only going to get smaller and smaller until we start to break down these silos and break down these walls and understand that all these pieces work together and there's huge overlap.
Yeah, that makes me think. What you just said makes me think of the fact that realistically, we're not just this case study is not saying you got to change your organization. This case study is saying here's how one organization did it. To what you just said is so true. Start having conversations. Find the right model based on your conversations with your people. Have that. What did you call it? Stupid time.
Stupid idea time.
Stupid idea time, right? Yeah, apply that ability to, or give your employees permission to be creative, to have stupid idea time, to come up with their own ideas for how to re-engineer your sales and marketing engine. How do you re-engineer how to serve the customers along their journey? I don't even know that we should call it sales and marketing anymore. Um, I don't know what the right term for it is, but we need to match how we communicate with them at every stage in this very complex decision making process. And a lot of our employees probably have taken the pulse, know better than we know what the customer wants, what they're thinking. So having those conversations, getting them involved now, but then also making a commitment to taking action. You can't have these conversations for a year, right? Give yourself a time frame. We're going to have these conversations for this long, and then we're going to start
Mhm.
acting on it to re-engineer this, to structure it in a way that will function for us, for our realities, for our employees even, and for our customers.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
my view on it. I always have to add um, that practical side to it. I have this I have this philosophy that an idea is only as great as it's well executed. We got to cross over from conversation to getting it done. And it
Definitely.
seems like this one case study, this one company was very successful at not just coming up with a structure, but also implementing it.
Hmm.
Another thing that this article doesn't talk about and that I'm sure is happening is the re-engineering of the re-engineering. Right? They're probably going through iterations. They're probably still testing. You mentioned testing and learning through the
Hmm.
process, and they're probably changing it as they go.
Totally. Yeah, I'm sure.
So it sounds like we agree with a lot of what's in this article, plus some nuances. Right? You've made some great points about how okay, let's be real. We can get rid of salespeople. They still have a place in that decision making process. Um, we do agree that something needs to change, and that successful organizations are going to be the ones who have start having conversations now, as you said, and I would like to also see them act on it. It may
Hmm.
give us marketing people some headaches. It may give agencies some headaches because our role may also have to change. We as agencies will also have to adapt to this new way of doing things because we too are structured right now to function in a silo. We
Yeah.
too have adapted ourselves to this reality. We too are to blame of this not functioning properly. So we too are going to have to adapt.
Yeah, absolutely. Everyone is.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on this article in closing?
No, I don't have any additional thoughts. I'm glad we were able to have this conversation. It's always helpful to, dig into the data and talk about it. And I hope that anyone who's tuning in today has some food for thought to walk away with, and that you start these conversations with your organization. Of course, like you said, an idea is only as good as, once it's implemented. So, have the conversation, make a plan, um, and just take this to heart, because like I said, I don't think this is changing anytime soon. I think this data is really concise. I'm glad they just focused on a few touch points instead of making it more complex. I think it's easier for people to sort of grasp it and understand it. But just always keep your customer in mind, not just what the customer can do for us, but what we have to do for the customer. And what we have to do for the customer is make sure that they have the information they need to make an educated decision. So that's sort of what I would part with.
Yeah, that's a great summary. And to add back in and stress something that you said, test. You
Hmm.
can go into this with the mindset that we are going to test segments of this new structure. You can test into it if you need to make a case with your superiors, with the heads of your organization. You can make a case. You can share this video with them or the article, which I will put in the links in the comments below. You can share the slides that I put together. I will make all this information available, and you can position it as a test approach, and you can have those conversations with your organization about how you can test into it and make the improvements segment by segment. Tanya, thank you so much, and thank you so much for being here today, bringing your perspective to this. And it's always such a pleasure to talk to you. Tell us, where can people find you online?
Yeah, well, thank you, Mana, for inviting me. And, I'm so glad we could reconnect on this topic that clearly we're both passionate about. So thank you so much for the opportunity. I'm on LinkedIn a lot, so you can find me Just look at my name, Tanya Stanfield. Tanya Rose Stanfield. I probably post more to my personal page than my company page for True Believer Brands. Otherwise, if you want to learn more about the company, you can go to truebelieverbrands.com. Reach out to me via LinkedIn or via email, which I think is on the site. I'm happy to talk with anyone who wants to really dig into this. I think, having the perspective of being in both marketing and sales, I could talk about this all day. So happy to chat more about it with anyone who's interested.
Yeah, and please do reach out and like drop a comment and tag Tanya, or if you're watching this on her feed, tell us what you thought. What are your thoughts about this? What other topics do you think I should cover, or we should cover in a part 2 of this? Let us know in the comments below. And as always, I will see you back here next time.
Thanks, everyone.